Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry, episode 75. As always, I'm joined by Dom.
I am Dom. I am joining you.
And Jordan.
Dragon, rock the dragon, Dragon Ball Z!
Episode 75. Last week, I think I ended the show saying 175. Not yet. It's another 2 years away.
2 years, yeah.
Yeah. So, this week, I only played a couple of games, but I played one quite a bit. So, I played some more Cuphead. I'm almost done with Cuphead. I have 3 levels left. I don't want to say what the levels are in case you guys haven't finished, because I don't want to spoil it for you guys.
Sure. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I have 3 levels left. And then afterwards, I'm going to go back and try to get A rank on the levels and stuff like that, and maybe go for Pacifist on the running gun levels to unlock black and white mode and stuff.
Motherfucker.
Yeah,
I
really love that game. Anyways, so I played that. I've been playing Destiny 2. Iron Banner started this week, so I've been fiddling around with that. Got the Iron Banner helmet for the Titan, so I'm pretty stoked about that.
Could you explain the Iron Banner to me, Jared?
Okay, the Iron Banner,
do with so many Destiny things.
Yeah. Okay, so there's 2 different weekly competitive modes that happen.
Right.
Trials of the Nine happens on Fridays to Tuesdays, and that's 4v4. You can only go in with a party of 4, and that's like high skill level multiplayer. That's like the best of the best, the tryhards, the neckbeards, the guys who only play Destiny PvP, right?
The
top of the line.
Beards?
Yeah. That's like top of the line. One of my only gripes with Destiny 2, like true gripes, is that I don't like that there's an achievement attached to that for winning a game in that mode. Not because I'm not capable of it. I'm not here trying to like humble brag or something. But I do think for people who just don't like playing PvP, it sucks that you have to go and try to win a PvP game in a very high skill level mode to try and get an achievement. It sucks, you know.
It always sucks when trophies are tied to online multiplayer.
It's cool if it's like try multiplayer. I'm down with that, but don't make people do specific things.
Well, but like
in multiplayer.
My thing is like if it's going to be 5 years later, and then the servers are basically either down or nobody's on them, and you're like trying to get this last trophy or last achievement to get your platinum. It sucks.
Well, I mean, like I think there should just be an achievement for entering the mode, not necessarily playing a match, but just like clicking into the mode and being like, oh, I can create a match, play a match, whatever. You know what I mean? Just that way, because from a developer standpoint, you want people to at least enter each of the things you work on. So, like, giving an achievement to, like, enter multiplayer, you might have some click-throughs to actually play, you know what I mean? As opposed to making people play an actual match. Because then, like you said, 5 years later, you can still click through to get to the multiplayer mode, you know what I mean? It's not forcing you to play an actual match. Anyways, though, tangent. The Iron Banner is a weekly event, and it runs in seasons, and each season lasts a week. Starts on Tuesday, ends on Tuesday. Essentially what it is it's commentated Crucible. So you have this separate guy, Lord Saladin, a really dumb name, commentating over the match instead of your normal commentary, and it's between regular Crucible and Trials of the Nine, the thing I just talked about. So it's like for people who want a little bit more competitive nature, but not necessarily somebody who's like going try hard, you know.
No neckbeards.
Basically, when you win a match, you get 5 tokens. When you lose a match, you get 2 tokens, and you want to take him to Lord Saladin to fill up the bar and get new items and stuff like that. It's essentially just another weekly event outside of the Crucible to give you a reason to play multiplayer is the easiest way to put it.
So,
like I said, it's definitely
Destiny crap.
Yeah, it's definitely not as high stakes though as Trials of the Nine, which I like because it's for people who are like in that mid ground. So every week you actually it hits everybody. So people are super casual. They have regular Crucible they could play. If people want a little bit of a challenge but they're not like crazy, they have Iron Banner, and then if they're super try hard, they have Trials of the Nine.
So, real quick, is it just commentated Crucible where you get special gear?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing I want to note, though, that's really cool is there's Overwatch Easter egg in Destiny 2. If you go on a 20 kill streak, but if you're involved in 20 straight kills without dying, because Destiny does the thing like Overwatch where it handles it differently. So if you like assist on a kill, they still count it as a kill. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So I've
noticed that.
Yeah, if you get involved in 20 kills without dying, the commentator will actually say, die, 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 which is an Easter egg throw to Reaper from Overwatch. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, so I played a little bit of Destiny 2 during the Iron Banner, but my main cup of tea for this week was Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So I said last week I hadn't played a whole lot of it, so I didn't really want to give impressions either way. I put in a good amount of time into it. I think I have like 12 shrines done, somewhere between like 10 and 15. I think it's like 12. I'm trying to maybe 11 because I've only upgraded twice. So yeah, I think 11. I got to Kakariko Village. Talk to the people there, yada yada yada. I guess so far, like I said, I'm not too far into the game either, but I'm still loving the art style and everything, and I like the combat. My biggest gripes with the game so far is that I do feel that the world is like pretty empty.
Yep.
I understand it's huge and that's great and everything like that, but it is like really empty.
It's empty, not even just from like people being there.
Games this year, and I thought like Ghost Recon Wildlands was sparse, and I think this is like even way more sparse. And a lot of times it's like you're just, how would I say this? The landscape isn't interesting, and the landscape isn't interesting enough to me for it to be as empty as it is. A lot of times, and that's probably my biggest gripe. Is I feel it seems like it's spread thin. You know what I mean? And the areas you get to are great. Like, I love Kakariko Village. I love that first, like, inn you get to after you get off the plateau and you have to go through, like, the Twin Peaks mountain and you run into that little stable. Like, all of the areas you visit and the people are cool. It just feels to me like it's spread a little bit, like, thin. And that's probably my biggest gripe right now with it. The weapons are cool and stuff like that. The shrines are already a little bit samey, which is kind of interesting considering I've only done 11 of them, and how many are in the game? 120?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, those aren't that interesting, which is kind of a shame, and I think this is a gripe that plenty of people have said, so I'm not, like, kicking over a new can you haven't heard of before, but, like, I don't know. The dungeons in Zelda are usually the coolest things, and I haven't played every Legend of Zelda game. I've only played a handful of that, and, like, I love Link Between Worlds. That's probably currently my favorite Zelda game. I haven't played Ocarina or Majora's Mask, so obviously, yeah.
What?
Yeah, but anyways, back to my.
You know what we should do?
Yeah.
You just gave me a great idea, and it's gonna be a short tangent. We should, the three of us, make a deal where we each play a game of the other's choosing.
That's
Something like that. That we wouldn't have normally done. That we're kind of forcing each other to do. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. We can talk about it later.
Yeah.
Not a bad idea.
I would play Ocarina or Majora's Mask if they come to the Switch. But it's just like, for me, I personally didn't think the improvements for the 3DS version of, was it Ocarina that came out again?
Both
Both
of them.
They didn't seem like very like large improvements, and I didn't feel like playing those games on the 3DS.
It's huge. It's a huge improvement.
I don't know so much about like the gameplay and stuff. The graphical improvement is gigantic. I'll say that much.
Yeah, it didn't feel like me like I was doing a due service to those games playing them on a 3DS screen, if that makes sense. Yeah. Anyways, that's besides the point. Yeah. So Breath of the Wild, I am enjoying it. I do feel like the world's a little empty. The enemies are cool and stuff like that, and I haven't, like I said, I'm very early in the game, so I might have a lot of stuff open up to me, but the characters are really cool. I like a lot of the characters you've met. Voice acting is hit or miss so far. Some of them I think are really well done, and some of them are like, ugh.
My thing is just like, if you're gonna have voice acting, just have voice acting throughout the game, as opposed to these little bits and pieces here and there. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
That's an interesting thing too that I want to bring up is, so I've been playing this for the most part as I've been watching other stuff or doing other stuff, because a lot of it is I wouldn't say busy work, that's a better way to put it, but I don't have to be fully involved in it. But what does
There's a lot of busy work though.
Yeah, what does suck is like when you do talk to the significant people and have those important conversations of where it starts doing the flashbacks and stuff, I immediately had to scramble, pause my video, turn up my volume on my Switch, and like, you know, get ready to like take in the story. And it's very weird and jarring sometimes with that. And it's not the game's problem, it's my problem, but it's like, oh, they're actually talking now, so I can't just read text. You know what I mean? Well, I can, but like, if there's voice acting, but if
you got something else going, you can always just hit the home button and that'll pause it for you until you're ready to go.
Yeah. Well,
Which works for most of the consoles, actually.
Yeah, I do pause it. It's very interesting that they only do voice acting in certain select moments. That being said, like with my gripes and everything, I do really enjoy this game. I think for 100% it'll be in my top 5 for Game of the Year. It's definitely not like up there. It's not number 1 by any means. I haven't finished it yet, so that might change. But I will say I am enjoying it more than I thought. And my one concern going in of it having a pretty empty world for the most part has been met. That being said, a lot of the other stuff that I felt I might not like, they've actually exceeded my expectations. So I'm enjoying it so far. Thumbs up.
A little advice for you, Jared. If you want to or are plan on completing the actual story, the campaign, I would advise really kind of sticking to that quite a bit, because it's really easy to kind of get lost in all the other activities to do, and especially the shrines, just because they are fun little puzzles and you kind of veer off. And I've gotten to the point where I've played it like over 60 hours or so, but I'm barely through any of the story, and I know a lot of people are the same. So
yeah,
I'm kind of like kicking myself because I want to actually be further through the story, and so just a word to the wise.
With that, so like with open world games, the way I handle it is if it's like a world I truly love and like characters I truly love, I'll definitely do everything and then mainline last. I did that with like Skyrim and stuff like that. With this, I do like the game, but I don't think I'm in love with the world to the point of focusing on side quests and all that stuff first. I think I'm definitely in the focus of like doing a little bit of side exploring, but mostly mainlining and then handling that stuff when I'm done. It's definitely not a game that I feel that I'm going to be doing all the side stuff and then focusing on the main story. Especially too with like Super Mario Odyssey right around the corner. I want to give Zelda my attention, but I want to like my priority is finishing the game to completion as far as story is concerned. Then I'll worry about all that other stuff, So
cool.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. What about you guys?
I got a quick one. I didn't play anything. Actually, I played one thing. Batman: The Enemy Within Season 2 from Telltale. Season 2, Episode 2, sorry.
Yeah.
It was weird. I don't know. It was a weird one. The first one was so good. So good. And this one just was... I don't really know how I feel about it. Good or bad, I was just kind of like, oh, this is all happening.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll
this
feel
makes
different
sense.
at the end of the season.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know. I was just kind of like, so this is where we're going with the story. I don't know. It was just like, I don't want to say much because I would ruin it. I'd spoil it. But it's different. I don't know. I don't know if it's bad necessarily, but it's definitely different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't played it yet. I need to get around to it.
Yeah.
Didn't watch anything or anything like that, no?
Been watching a lot of This Is Us. Heard of it?
Yeah, I heard the show's really good. I want to get into it. One thing that surprised me, one of the main actors on that show, I guess, is dead in the story. From the beginning. From the beginning of the show, one of the characters is dead.
Is it like flashbacks?
I guess. The way you said it isn't really how it is, but technically, I guess, yeah, you're right.
Not watching the show and reading it, that sounds weird to me. I've never seen the show, but that's what I know, yeah.
It's not, like, that's not what you take away from it. I mean, technically you're right, but it's not weird like that, I guess.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it's consumed mine and Emily's lives almost completely, so that's what's going on here.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's it. I don't think I watched anything else or did anything. I have had a long week. Long as a black man's...
Not again, Dom. We already had that issue before the show. This is a family program.
Jordan, tell us about all those orcs you've been killing.
Yeah, so, actually, I'll make that the quick part. That is, he's referring to Middle-earth, Shadow of War. And I've played it for probably about 6-ish hours, mostly just through the story. I've been slaying some orcs, and, it's really just improves upon the first game, which I like quite a bit. Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor is the first game, and expands on it. The world feels bigger. The a lot of the mechanics are refined in the right ways. There hasn't been anything so far that has felt like it's worse than the first game or that they fucked it up since the first game, so that's really good. And then I haven't really got to that part, but I do think it's cool how instead of the Nemesis system only being nemesises, well, I don't even know what the plural of nemesis would be.
Nemesi.
I like Nemesi.
Maybe,
It might not be correct, but I like Nemesi.
Nemesi. But you actually can recruit your own orcs, so I'm excited to hop into that. It looks incredible running at 4K on the PS4 Pro with HDR. One thing is they have an extra, it's like a 40 gigabyte game, I think, something like that. And they have an extra 4K cutscene pack just for the cinematics. That's an extra 30 gigs, which, I've upgraded my hard drive. Well, I'm not worried about it because I have the 2 terabyte hard drive, and knowing that I was going to be playing 4K games, I expected just.
You
as much.
prepared for it, yeah.
Man,
I actually expected them to be even bigger. So.
That's crazy. That's so much. But then it's also a good sign that it's separate. So if you don't have, a Pro or in
You're
4K
not forced
TV,
into the download. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which I've heard that Xbox, even if you don't have the Xbox One X, you're going to be downloading the full 4K game anyways, which is
I bet they could fix that later on.
Beyond. But anyways, I think it's totally worth it. Yeah, Beyond. I think it's totally worth it. I was kind of perturbed at the fact that I downloaded the game, had it ready to go at 11 p.m. Central the night of release, and then I even looked in the extra add-ons because I had a couple bonus items for pre-ordering, and it didn't say anything about the 4K pack until the game actually released at 11. So I went back and watched the X-Men: The Gifted that had aired that night, so I was all good. It worked perfectly for that time frame, but I was kind of like, why would that not be a thing that you kind of like a pop-up or something when you're downloading the game?
Give you a notice.
Right, exactly. And why wouldn't you be able to preload that just like you preloaded the game? It's not a big deal. I have a fast internet connection, and so it was pretty quick. But it's definitely worth it. Like, the cutscenes look incredible, and it is quite a beautiful game in, I guess it's checkerboard 4K. So, having quite a bit of fun of that in that game. I'll be, probably diving a lot deeper this next week and have some more, some thicker impressions for you. But what I really want to talk about are things that I watched this week. First of all, I guess I'll go with shows. I've got 2 shows I want to shout out. First, I've talked about Broad City coming back. It came back several weeks ago, a month or so ago now, actually. And this is the 3rd season. And it's been a little bit... Is it the 4th season? I don't know. Anyways, it came back several weeks ago, and we're about, they just aired the 4th episode. It's been a little rough. It hasn't been their strongest season at all. I haven't laughed nearly as hard at those first 3 episodes, but the episode this week, which was coming back off a 2-week break, was incredible. It was fucking hilarious. It was called Mushrooms. It was about them taking mushrooms and going on a trip throughout New York City. Half of it was animated in this really cool style, the same style.
You guys ever done that?
Their title card. Oh, I love psychedelics. Yeah, absolutely.
Me either.
Big fan of psychedelic drugs and experiences. Be safe, be responsible, do them with people that you know very well and in places where you're going to be safe. But we
Not
talked
strangers in New York.
Well, I mean, they were with, each other, and they're like best friends, so I think that's sufficient. And they're familiar with the city of New York. It's not like they just traveled there to do mushrooms. So I think their experience, they were doing it right. But back during E3, I kind of had a complaint against Wolfenstein: The New Order, the trailer, where the dude was, taking the acid, and 2 seconds later he's tripping, and there's, shit that isn't there talking to him, and then Pete Hines comes out and be like, yeah, this dude's tripping acid, and like kind of glorifying it. And I mentioned on this show how I was a little bit upset with the way that they were portraying psychedelic drugs, which are near and dear to my heart. And I think that I talked about how a lot of times in the media they're portrayed in that same way, where they're just fucking crazy, and people kind of pushed a little too far and misrepresented a lot of times. This was a much more accurate representation. You could really feel that they knew what the fuck they were talking about, that they weren't just like, oh, this is cool, we should make jokes about it, or we should act like we've done it before. They really actually knew what the experience was like and showed it in both a positive light and what some of the negatives can be, so it was a really balanced interpretation, so I really appreciated that. Besides that, the episode was fucking hilarious, and back to more of the level of hilarity that I've come to expect from that show. So absolutely one of the best episodes that they've had throughout the entire series, and I just love that show. If you haven't watched it or don't know what it is, I would definitely recommend checking it out. Also, last night, my favorite show on television currently airing came back. That is Mr. Robot, show on USA, which the reason I didn't start it from episode 1, season 1, when it started airing, was because it was on USA Network, and I'm usually not a fan of their shows. But they've really outdone themselves with this one, and the start of season 3, it's gotten super crazy, super dark, crazy directions that they've gone in. Basically, the story of the show is about this hacker who wants to basically take down one of the largest corporate conglomerates in the world and destroy 70% of the world's wealth, which would obviously change the entire global economic climate. So that was kind of the arc of season 1. I won't go into details about how what has happened or what went down, but I will say that it's constantly engaging and very thrilling. And this episode, they hinted at even going in really an even further direction, kind of what I've talked about with Rick and Morty, where they're going so far out of bounds, but in a good way, to where I'm just like, I'm totally down for the ride. I'm so happy to see them doing it. It's with both of these shows, it's stuff that you really don't see a lot of times in most other TV shows. So I'm really excited to see such great and popular shows going off in really wild and thought-provoking directions. So I wanted to give both of those two shows, well, both of those two being Mr. Robot and Rick and Morty, but also, of course, Broad City, as I mentioned earlier. Those shows deserve great big shouts out. So really enjoyed those episodes this week. And then besides that, since the last time I was on this show, I had the pleasure of witnessing 2, in my opinion, cinematic masterpieces within
Master Pie?
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to figure out the plural of certain words. Master Pie, I guess you could say. I had the pleasure of enjoying those. The first, I've already mentioned on the show, so I guess I'll go ahead and talk about that. That would be Blade Runner 2049. This movie runs at 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's about 3 hours long, and I've seen it both times now. I saw it twice. I saw it again last night. I saw it on extra large screens that were bigger than regular movie theaters, and man, that was absolutely worth the extra cost. It was this film. It's directed by Denis Villeneuve, who has directed some of my favorite movies of the last few years. Arrival last year, Sicario before that, Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal, Prisoners also with Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman. All of those are really, really great thrillers, and like I said, some of my favorite movies over the last years. With this, he's become absolutely one of my favorite directors, doing it now, but also of all time. There's so many things that I could say about this movie. It's gorgeously shot. The music is absolutely marvelous. It totally really does take your breath away and is something that's completely awe-inspiring. Shakes the entire theater, as well as the sound design. It's really something special. And then it's really just a really great mystery. It's an awesome sequel to the original movie, which is very heady, very sci-fi, and even kind of psychedelic in its cyberpunkiness, I guess you could say. But man, they stuck to a pretty simple premise, with it being this mystery that Ryan Gosling's trying to figure out throughout the movie, and they just nail it. They nail being a Blade Runner sequel, they nail being an awesome cyberpunk movie, they nail being a really great mystery, and then so many other things that fit in between those. So I would absolutely recommend it. I do say that I think you get a lot more enjoyment out of it if you've seen the first film. I think you should see the first film in general because I think it's a sci-fi classic. And you guys know how big of a fan of cyberpunk I am. It's one of the biggest it probably is the biggest cyberpunk anything of all time, not just film, and it's also one of the most influential science fiction films of all time. So with that being said, I'd also like to shout out the fact that Denis Villeneuve is in charge and going to be directing the Dune movie or TV series, whatever they do. I'm sure it's a movie, even though they haven't announced. And I've become a big fan of that, partially because of Comic Book Girl 19 and her doing the book club with Dune. I've been really enjoying that universe, and it's something that they made a David Lynch film in the 80s that I'm not a huge fan of, but I like to say in Denis we trust, because he's nailed this gigantic sci-fi franchise now with Blade Runner. He's made all these awesome thrillers, and now I think he's really going to nail Dune. It's very tough stuff and very heady stuff and far out there, both Dune and Blade Runner, but I think he's absolutely the man for the job. It sucks that it's not doing so well at the box office because of the fact that it is a really big budget film that just pushes itself really far outside the mainstream. In a lot of ways it feels more like an art house film, but I'm still glad that he's gotten the chance to do that and that he's going to be getting the chance to do Dune. So I know I talked a lot about that, but I could be talking about this movie forever. I love it. I think it's actually an absolute masterpiece, and I loved both times seeing it, all 3 hours that it was. So now a little connection to that, and the other masterpiece that I watched this week, the writer of one of Denis' last couple movies, Sicario, which I absolutely recommend as well. The writer of Sicario wrote and directed the movie I watched called Wind River, starring Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen. This is like a Western mystery thriller, and I won't say too much about the plot because it is very intricate, but it was fucking awesome. If you like Sicario, he also wrote Hell or High Water that came out last year. If you like westerns, if you like thrillers, if you like well-acted movies, I absolutely recommend it. It was one of these movies I've talked about how I haven't been watching trailers as of late, and I heard about the movie, heard that it was getting great reviews, and I really didn't know anything about it going in. It was absolutely worth it, and it really just kind of took me away on an adventure, a scary adventure, but an adventure nonetheless. And I was so pleased with it, and it was really crazy seeing that just a couple days after Blade Runner, seeing really two profoundly incredible movies back to back like that. I was really pleased with that. They don't come around as often as they should these days, and maybe I was eating all my dessert a little too quickly there, because there's not that many other things that are that awesome to be going out and enjoying. But yeah, highly recommend both of those movies, and love them very much.
The Wind River, I saw the trailers for. It looks really good. It looks really interesting. My own problem that I've come to realize, I don't really like Jeremy Renner. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that would
anything to do
deter
with the
from
Marvel, the MCU stuff?
Oh no, I'm not. No, the whole comments about Scarlett Johansson, it's not that. It's just for some reason.
Oh, I didn't know. That's not what I was talking about.
say?
Just him being Hawkeye, him being in these gigantic movies. What comments are you referring to?
Oh, he basically, and I'm paraphrasing. He basically, during an interview, called Black Widow a slut, which people get in a tiffy of and get all crazy for. And you can have your rights.
I think I remember what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's not why. It just, for some reason, he just doesn't do it for me. I don't like Hawkeye either, so it's kind of fitting. You know what I mean? But yeah, that doesn't deter me from seeing Wind River. It's just an interesting thing that I came across of, like, I don't like Mark Wahlberg in movies, and I've come to realize I don't like Jeremy Renner in movies either.
I can understand not liking either of those actors. I will say that I think Jeremy Renner is in a whole other universe.
No, it has nothing to do with his acting. Yeah, I'm not saying Jeremy Renner is a bad actor. Just something
Some
about
people
him.
You just don't like their face.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
Yeah. let's hop into the news. The first bit of news here, it comes by of IGN. Brian Burnett talks about how Microsoft announced 4 new Xbox One S bundles. So all of these bundles are $279. They come with a 500 gigabyte storage. They come with a wireless controller, 3 months of Xbox Live Gold, and a month of Game Pass. So all of them come with a free month of Game Pass, which I think is really cool. The 4 bundles in question: the Minecraft Complete Adventure bundle, which comes with Minecraft and an Explorers pack, which is like texture packs and stuff, as well as the first season of Telltale's Minecraft Story Mode. The second one is the Rocket League Blast-Off bundle, which includes the download code for Rocket League. That's pretty cool. Another bundle is the Xbox One S Starter bundle, which includes 3 months of Game Pass. And the last one is the Ultimate Halo bundle, which includes a code for Halo 5 and the Halo Master Chief Collection. I think all of these are good value, but the Halo one and the Minecraft one I think are the biggest value there. The fact that you can get Minecraft and Story Mode, and then obviously getting 5 Halo games, 6 if ODST is included. I'm not sure if it is, because I remember ODST was given free to the people who were like early investors in the Master Chief Collection when it wasn't working.
I'm pretty sure at this point it's free DLC for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm like 99% on that.
I think all of these are really cool. I like that everyone gets a free month of Game Pass. I think that's really smart. This is not surprising. Obviously, Phil Spencer's talked about before. They're going to sell a whole lot more, millions more of the Xbox One S than they ever will of the Xbox One X. I think these are really cool bundles. The Halo bundle, I think, is really solid. Like, if I didn't have an Xbox One, or if like mine was kind of on its last steps and I needed to upgrade to a One S, and I just didn't want to make the move to One X because it's like, why, if I don't have a 4K TV? 280 is a really good deal, man, for an Xbox One S by itself.
Absolutely.
Plus all of these games. I think these are really solid bundles. Anything else you guys want to add?
I do remember, like last, and this is a me problem, not a Microsoft problem, but I remember last, it would have been November, around Black Friday, the One S bundles got even cheaper. Like, they were down to like $200.
Yeah.
Like, for like a couple, like for a short period, it was all the way down to like $200. So now I'm like, even as good as 280 is with these other games, I'm like, I don't want to spend that much on it. But
Black Friday's close.
Yeah, but as I've told you guys, as soon as the Dark Knight trilogy is released in 4K Blu-ray, that is the exclusive that will have me buying an Xbox.
Also, to note the what was I going to say? I completely forgot my train of thought. Something to do with the Xbox One S. Oh, the Halo bundle is exclusive to Walmart, which is interesting.
I can't stand retailer exclusives.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I do not like that. I mean, these new like Crystal DualShock 4s.
That's fucking stupid. It's the worst.
It's stupid, but those are specifically all retailer exclusives. So that's different, right? But when you have just one thing that's one retailer, also, I really don't.
So it's only in the United States, but like, I mean, that's pretty much saying just the market in general, because like Xbox is big in Europe, but it doesn't really have anything in Japan, so it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah. The next news story here, there's not too much there. This is probably outside of our topic we're going to be talking about. The biggest news story that we're going to be talking about. There's an initial thing and then a follow-up. So the initial story comes by Allegra Frank over at Polygon, and she writes, Star Wars Battlefront II beta's loot boxes prompt player concerns. With a month to go until launch, Star Wars Battlefront II is already steeped in backlash. The game's first open beta kicked off this weekend. This was last weekend, giving players their first taste of its random loot drop system, which hints that players may be asked to pay up in order to progress. In Battlefront 2, loot crates contain a number of different items, including objects for crafting in-game currency and something called star cards. As Electronic Arts explained back in June, these offer upgraded versions of basic stats and abilities for the multiplayer mode. Star cards are crucial for anyone who wants to develop the most powerful characters and ships possible, but they're only obtainable through random loot drops. The article goes on to state that you can earn the currency through gameplay, but it seems like the pace at which you earn the currency isn't balanced well with you just paying money to get upgraded. And obviously this drew a lot of concern. Before we get into DICE's words on what they plan to do, what are your guys' thoughts on this? I know, Dom, you might be a day one. Jordan, I know you're going to eventually pick up Battlefront 2. I don't know if day one or not. Like, do these loot boxes concern you guys?
So, if you recall, a few months ago when they first announced that there would be no season pass and all the DLC would be free, my immediate reaction, because it dropped also with the trailer, that information was, I was like through the roof happy, like this is fantastic, this trailer is fucking awesome, Battlefront, Star Wars, Last Jedi, blah, blah, blah. I was losing my damn mind, right? And and as we chatted on Facebook or whatever it was, Jared kind of met me with like immediate hesitation, like, really? There's no season pass from EA? That's I don't know, man.
Yeah.
And then here we are. It all makes sense.
I don't know
it
if
all
I
makes
said
sense.
it on the show, but I knew from the moment that they announced that it's like, well, then it's going to be jam-packed with microtransactions.
Yeah.
I got too excited too early.
Yeah, I am definitely day one on Battlefront 2. I wasn't on Battlefront 1 because I didn't feel like the content was there. But Battlefront 2, I'm mostly just super excited about that single-player story, and I am such a big Star Wars fan that I am jumping into. But just more in general about microtransactions, I'll say this. I think that, when they really started getting into console games within the last 2 or 3 years is when they really started getting in there. I think not only is it the fault of these dumb whales that just buy inordinate amounts of, at the end of the day, what is pretty useless stuff, digital content that is really pretty useless. It's also the fault of, and I'm absolutely part of this, most of us gamers who just said, yeah, they're in there, but they're really not affecting me. It's not that bad, this, that, and the other. It's a part of the game, but I don't have to deal with it. And even if I might have said those things at the time, I also had the feeling that it was going to creep into where it's either it is a big deal, it is affecting you, or it's going to creep into where it absolutely permeates the industry and games that don't need it will have it. And that's where we're at the crossroads where both of those two situations have happened. There's so many games that clearly don't need microtransactions, but they have them just because they're going to allow the developer and publisher to make that much more extra money. I totally understand the fact that AAA games are more expensive to produce than they ever have been and are probably cheaper than they ever have been. But at the same time, I think there's better ways than a lot of these situations have been. I think there's a lot better ways to go about it and to explain it to your consumers, because a lot of these things aren't explained well, if at all. And so I think that you really you have a duty to someone that is buying your game for $60 to at least show them that you're not just exploiting them, really. And so this Battlefront situation does seem very exploitative, especially the fact that it's basically you just pay to win, and it's giving online players an unfair advantage over people that just may not have the money that some maybe rich kid does, that just gets ultra powered up, may not want to support these microtransactions, or may just want to play the game without having to be so goddamn hardcore that they spend an extra $50 to $100 to actually just be competitive in the online multiplayer. So, and it's gotten pretty disgusting.
There's always been, being a Call of Duty 4 veteran, I'll give myself that title. There was always an advantage you could get if you had enough money. You could buy the nicest, Turtle Beach headset, better controllers, and so on. But
we thank you for your service, Dom.
Well, let's not go too far with that analogy. But that stuff was at least outside of the game. It wasn't the actual developer and publisher of the game. They might have sponsored it or put their logo on stuff, but it wasn't actual advantages through extra monetary
That's a
purchases.
very different situation.
Yeah.
That gave it to you. You could be a little bit better with a better headset, right? But at least Activision wasn't selling you that ability to get better in the game, I guess, and through a random gambling type mechanism too. That's could also be seen as exploitive. That part I don't care about quite as much, but the pay to win stuff is to me where I get disgusted, and I don't like that.
Like with this, it automatically damages your competitive community 100% because
right,
sure.
Yeah, 100%, no matter how you look at it. Like for me,
unbalances it.
Yeah, for me, microtransactions aren't about existence. I'm fine with them existing. It's about implementation. I think they're implemented a lot of times very poorly. It's funny that we see all these loot boxes coming out now as a result of the success of Overwatch. Overwatch still has the best microtransactions, I think, in games because they're 100% aesthetic. You know what I mean? It has nothing to do with competitive nature. Nothing. Like somebody can sit there and spend $100 to $200 on loot boxes, and guess what? They just have a cooler skin. That doesn't bother me. Whatever.
And
which
where was
the
outrage?
See the fucking arms. It's a first-person game. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But like there was no one even batted an eye at Overwatch, and everyone knew there's loot boxes. But as little information as we have, like it's been blowing up recently, and everyone is giving Battlefront and a hard time about this, and they should, because it's like you said, it's poorly implemented compared to Overwatch and some other games where you can do that sort of thing. And even DLC, all this in general, my preference would be like just charge me $20 extra for the game. I'd be okay with that myself, but
that's the
pay
thing.
To win though.
If AAA games are that much more expensive to make and you are giving us that much more value, charge me $100 for The Witcher 3. I would pay it because it is a product that is worth that amount of money and is absolutely showing you its value when you're playing through it. It's not a question to me in any sense of the word. In a lot of these games, Shadow of Mordor, basically any open world game that isn't just bland and just boring, I mean, most of them are worth more than $60. Yeah. I play them for hundreds of hours at a time, and most of the content, there's lots of games where it's just, you kind of get into the grind of doing the same thing over and over again. That's a different story, but especially, like I said, games like Witcher 3 and stuff like that, where you can tell that they put so much love and care into hundreds of hours worth of quality content, it is worth more than $100, and you don't need to be nickel and diming me here and there. Just make it an extra. I get that it's very hard, to sell that up front, but just make it an extra cost. It's worth it in the end.
Yeah, I hate to be the cynic, but I mean, microtransactions aren't put into games because they need to recoup costs. It's because they just want to make as much money as possible. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's like,
but there is extra cost to be recouped.
Yeah. But the thing is like moving a game's price up to $70, $80 doesn't necessarily mean that comes with the caveat that they're going to remove microtransactions. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
good point.
Yeah, and I think it's just all about implementation. Like, I could care less if microtransactions are in games because unless it's a game I really love, I spent like maybe $5 or $10 on Overwatch because I really wanted a specific skin. But like, I'm of the thought that it's all about responsibility, and these are two different conversations talking about how like you buying microtransactions and how they're implemented. But like, I think Battlefront 2 is doing such a poor job, and it's funny because there was all this hullabaloo about Shadow of War, and you either had to grind or pay to get the legendary orcs, and that one I see a completely different argument of. I think that people superbly overreacted with that for a lot of different reasons. With this, it's like, people are going to be playing the multiplayer, and they're going to be at a disadvantage. Somebody who paid money has a level 4 Boba Fett or whatever it is, and he's just able to like rip through entire teams. And how is that fun for anybody? They're like, he paid money.
There's an actual invulnerability to that microtransaction where you have that certain Boba Fett, and for in certain times when he's doing certain things, he's actually invulnerable, and that is totally egregious. The connection to Shadow of War, I think, I'm not comfortable with it in that game. They don't need to be in there. It is a single player game, even though it does have some asynchronous multiplayer where you can like redeem your buddies or just random online players that have been killed by certain captains or whatever. There's some online connectivity to be played there, but at the same time, it does not need these microtransactions. I'm not okay with it. With that being said, it isn't in the way, and it is, you do have to go to a separate menu screen to get into it. It's not all up in your face. The two currencies that you're using are clearly defined. One's gold, one's silver. The in-game is silver. And the fact of the matter is, it's, you can make that choice to spend thousands of dollars. I think that's stupid, and you're, really kind of fucking things up for the industry in a larger sense. But you can spend thousands of dollars if you really wanted to, and you're not going to affect my game really in the slightest. You're not going to affect my game at all.
Yeah.
And that's a totally different story with Battlefront. That's probably the biggest issue.
It's so odd that you have like these big wigs and people who are making decisions who see the success of Overwatch and are like, well, we need to put loot boxes in there, we can get money. But they don't understand why the loot boxes work and why people are okay with them. And I mean, to some instance, that might even drive sales more if your loot boxes are like Overwatch, where it's like completely aesthetic. I think that lends people a little bit easier time of putting their hand to their wallet and like, you know what, I appreciate the way they do these. I want to try out to get some new skins. I'm down with paying $10. Whereas with Battlefront,
like you said, I enjoy it so much. I threw a few bucks in there, got skins that I wanted. Cool, we're good to go.
Yeah.
So this is going to be they're making it more attractive so that the actual point of sale, like in the game, they got to sell that microtransaction, right, to everybody. So, well, I'm sucking. I keep getting killed over and over. Well, I'm going to start buying these, and then I'm doing a little bit better. I'm getting some kills. I'm going to buy some more. I'm going to buy some more. So that kind of leads into a lot of people are saying, well, instead of not buying the game, why don't you just buy the game and not buy the microtransactions? But to me, that's going to send the opposite message, and that's going to make them want to make the microtransaction more attractive by making it more pay to win and putting more content behind it, right?
Yeah.
That's what I worry about would send that kind of message. But
like,
exploitation.
I really hope that the single player campaign is so good and so strong, because if it comes out and there's a lot of issues with single player, that's just going to pile onto the fact of all of this stuff, right? Like, it's just going to be, and I really, the people who are behind it, Mitch Dyer and Walt Williams, I think they have a good team behind it, and
absolutely.
I have no doubt in the single player. It's just upsetting that we finally get our single player campaign and now there's other issues. It's really unfortunate. The second part of this, though, is actually DICE's response. So this comes away of GameSpot, Eddie over at GameSpot. Star Wars Battlefront II beta ends. Here's what's changing. Millions of people played the beta, and DICE received a lot of feedback. DICE did not say exactly how many people played the beta, only noting that it was in the millions. Whatever the case, DICE surely has a lot of feedback to consider from the Battlefront 2 beta. The developer will be looking at things like Battlefront 2's controversial crate system and progression overall. That's another thing we didn't touch on. I'm just getting out of the article here. How they replaced last game's progression with this, where it's like it's vastly rooted in the crate system is the problem. The studio also said that the specialist infiltration ability is probably too overpowered. So basically, they said that they're going to look into the controversial crate system. They didn't really come out and say full-heartedly they're changing anything. It goes on to say, regarding crates and progression, which has been criticized for trending towards pay-to-win, DICE first pointed out that the beta contained an incomplete look at how well this will work. The studio promised more tuning over time, with one major goal being that the most powerful items can only be earned through gameplay. That shouldn't be tuning, that's game design. That's my own opinion,
right.
But not by spending money. For lots more on this, check out GameSpot, whatever. So
we'll see.
They're basically saying they're going to tune it. I think that's a wholehearted lie, and now they're trying to backpedal on a problem. That's not something that requires tuning. That's
and they're diverting.
Design. Yeah, exactly. They're diverting attention. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to worry about the crate system, but also this power in the game, it's kind of overpowered, so they're going to be working on that too. Like, they're not 100% focusing on that. It's weird to me too that they're talking about it is a tuning issue. You know what I mean? It's like, well, we need to figure out what things should only be available through gameplay. It's like,
no, that's from the ground up kind of issue.
Yeah, I really don't like their feedback on this, it's really upsetting because DICE has been making the Battlefield games, obviously, and those have had some minor issues, but they've never had the extent of issues that Call of Duty has had in concerns with microtransactions over the last couple of years. And it's a shame now with Star Wars, out of all of the Battlefield games I worked on, this is the one, and it's obvious because it's the one that's going to make the most money off of these microtransactions because it's Star Wars, right. that it has these issues, and it is upsetting to see their response. We can't catch their chickens before they're hatched. Hopefully there's some more news from this before the game comes out and people get their hands on the new and improved version of this, if there even is one. I don't know. I'm not buying this day one, but for people who are, I kind of feel bad because it's like they're waiting to see if DICE actually does something. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this part up specifically, Jared, because that's the craziest thing about this whole situation is the fact that everyone got so upset and found out about these microtransactions because they played the beta. Why the fuck are there microtransactions in a beta? That doesn't make any sense, and that's probably the most egregious part to me. It's really fucked up.
Yeah. Ugh, not a good look.
Do they carry over at least? What they're buying now, are they carrying over to the actual game?
I don't know. That's a good question. The funny thing, too, you have to remember is that the Call of Duty World War II beta that recently happened, a lot of these kind of questions and concerns came up because people found out about this stuff through that beta, too. So it's like, how do you expect to release a beta and not have people see things and complain about things that are bad? Like, they just thought that
maybe
people are just excited to play the beta. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Maybe that's what they're trying to do is kind of like get that complaining out of the way so the actual full release doesn't have the weight of this gigantic wave.
The conversation ends beforehand.
Transactions.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
That's it for Battlefront 2. Jordan, you had a topic for us?
Yeah, so like you said, some of the news stories, especially the one that we just talked about, actually connect pretty well to the topic, which is dealing with gamer culture. And what I mean by that is, I was recently listening to Colin's Last Stand Fireside Chats, which is the new podcast that he started, and his first episode was about his current relationship with games after he left Kinda Funny and started focusing most of his time on politics and history in the videos that he makes. And I was very interested to see where he was at in his relationship with games, because I think, like many, I was wondering what had happened with that specific part of his life after he left his company Kinda Funny. So really great point that he brought up was the fact that the thing that was tiring him and making him so upset about games weren't games themselves, but it was the communities that surrounded it, the people that were playing it, and the people that were complaining so much, or that were making such a big fuss about things that didn't matter, or just the general bullshit that's involved where, we gotta suss this whole fucking microtransaction thing out, where really we shouldn't be having to deal with that. We should be able to just talk more about, and I'm not saying like fuck you, Jared, for bringing it up. I'm saying like fuck, EA, fuck the publishers for, forcing this into games where it really doesn't need to be there. And we should be just, really talking about not just the enjoyment of games. We absolutely need to talk about the things that are fucked up about them. And I mean, like, just not good gameplay or stuff like that. We need to be balanced in our opinions, but we should be talking about things that are more important and that matter more, right? And having more progressive conversations in that sense. So it is upsetting that there's so much surrounding games that we kind of have to deal with, in a sense, if you're going to be part of online gamer culture and be involved in that conversation. And so that was kind of where I wanted to start the conversation off. It also drew a line in my brain to something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, and something I've even mentioned on the show recently, which is my least favorite part of anime is not the anime. My second least favorite part is the bullshit, like, fan service, which is all the perverted shit, like the upskirt shots on, like, 13-year-old girl characters and stuff like that. I realize that's kind of part of Japan culture. I get that a lot of the, like, Japanese culture is fucking perverted as shit. In some ways, I'm
shots
really into the fact. Well, no, I'm really into the fact that, in a lot of ways, Japan is a lot more progressive when it comes to being open about sexuality, whereas we're more open about violence, which is an unfortunate downside in a lot of ways. They both have their ups and downs, the two American and Japanese, the two cultures, but yeah, part of that downside is the fact that it does tend to turn into perversion, so that's my second least favorite part about anime. Sorry, that was a tangent, but it all ties in. My first least favorite part about anime is the fucking community, and one big part of that being the fact that we have to have this gigantic battle over subs versus dubs.
So
we can't
dumb.
just enjoy what we want to enjoy. We can't just have the dub favorite people watching dubs and have the sub favorite people watching subs, and everybody just be cool with it and come together and have a conversation about the content of the anime itself. We have to have this fucking dumb culture war that so many people get involved in that just doesn't matter at the end of the day. There's a consumer want, and consumers are willing to pay for both of the different types. There's plenty of companies making money off both, so what's the fucking issue? If there is enjoyment coming on both sides, then why can't that just be good enough at the end of the day? And there's a lot of similar issues in gamer culture, so that's where I thought we could start this conversation.
That's pretty good. So I didn't watch that video from Colin, but I'm curious now, because my first reaction to it
is... It's an audio-only podcast, by the way.
Okay, so it's audio-only. My first reaction is don't be such a baby. Just ignore, of course, you're on the internet. People are going to bitch, and everyone's having a fit. Just ignore, you don't have to listen to it, right? But then you went into it later, Jordan, where it's if you want to participate and be a part of this community, then it's hard to ignore all that sound of all that shit you don't want to hear, right? It's
so
kind of
much
tough.
of it. So
it's
much
exhausting.
of it is bickering. Yeah. Exhausting bickering.
I guess so. I'm gonna say two different things. One related to the Colin thing, and a second thing related to like my own personal relationship with gamer culture. So the thing regarding like Colin, I understand what you're saying. I haven't watched the video obviously, but from what you've said, I understand where he's coming from. But my opinion is, if you're somebody who is considered a quote-unquote influencer, somebody who's getting paid literally by the community to give your opinions on what's happening in the gaming industry, you kind of need to rise above that. And I understand it's hard, shit happens, but like complaining about it is kind of odd, because if you're willing to put yourself out there to be a figurehead in the gaming industry and be somebody who influences opinion and thought, you kind of have to deal with that stuff. That comes with the job. You know what I mean? That kind of
that's the point, right? That's why
he really wasn't necessarily complaining about it. His point was that shouldn't be part of the job. He should be able to, get to the stuff that's actually important and not dumb bullshit at the end of the day.
I think that's about building your community to see that in a certain way. The way Kind of Funny was built and they built it is they wanted to talk about everything happening in gaming, not just a positive. You know what I mean? Whereas somebody like Easy Allies, I think... this is kind of a bad comparison because they do talk about everything, but they are way more positive focused, right?
Absolutely.
Way more positive focused. And I think that's not a gripe on Kind of Funny. They just have their own process of talking about video game news, and they're a lot more CNN than they are Disney Channel. And I'm not calling it Easy Allies. You understand what I'm trying to say?
They're more gamer enthusiast than some of these other outlets.
Yeah. My own personal relationship with gaming culture, and I think this goes with like anime culture, stuff like that. My problem are the groups of people who only identify as that thing and find their identity only in that thing. All three of us play video games. Our lives don't revolve around video games, right? We play video games, we love video games, but they're not our entire world. And you know the type of kids I'm talking about, the people you grow up with where they buy every single game, even to a fault where they're like in debt or something like that, and they're just so focused on playing the latest and greatest game and playing all these games and buying all these games. When in reality, if they sit back and look at it, they're not really enjoying those experiences. They're not taking in the bigger parts of gaming and why it's important to people. They're just like, I'm a gamer. I play all the video games. You know what I mean?
That's where this whole... my backlog is so fucking long thing comes in. I'm like, shut the fuck up and enjoy the fact that you have a life where you're allowed to, you can allow yourself to enjoy a library full of
to have a backlog.
You don't have to play.
Great problem to have.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, like, you have a library. You don't have a backlog. Nobody's putting a gun to your head. You don't have a boss.
You're putting that pressure on yourself.
Finish that game up. You're not getting paid this week, Sonny, if you didn't finish that game up, unless you're working at IGN or something like that. It's like, shut the fuck up and quit bugging me on Facebook about how many games you have in your backlog. And, I feel like I gotta play this before I get to this, and I'm not enjoying this because I feel like I should be playing that. It's like, just play what you want to play. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead, Dom.
I think it's just internet culture, really, and like the games community, I guess, is kind of like picking the worst parts of it, where like so many people are heard right now. So we have, and then it even goes into like 2016 and this whole anti-political correctness thing, and then like the anti-political correctness thing, where the people complaining about political correctness are just as triggered as the people they're complaining about, and it loops and loops and loops. Like, I'm sick of your complaining about your complaining about your complaining, right?
Yeah.
And you can go on forever.
It's a room full of people yelling, and they all want to be heard, but none of them are willing to quiet down and start listening.
And it's just a lot of voices, yeah.
And I think the thing, too, is people try to say, like, gaming culture is so much worse, and anime culture is so much worse than movies and stuff like that. And I think the reason it seems that way is because I think gaming culture and anime culture are way closely tied to internet in a way that movies aren't, and other cultures aren't. And I think that's why it flares up so much, because I think the gaming culture and anime culture are so closely tied to the internet culture, and like
a lot of overlap too. It's kind of a Venn diagram there,
Exactly. And there's plenty of parts of like the gaming culture that I don't like. Like I said, the types of people who find all of their identity with one thing. I think that's the worst thing you can do. Be a modern day Renaissance man. Like, have different varied interests. It makes you a more interesting person. Like, just like different things. Don't be the person that's only known for playing video games. Like, is that an existence?
Be cultured.
And also there's game snobs, just like there's film snobs and anime snobs, and like going back to like the anime thing. If I was somebody I like anime, I'm not like an anime head, but like if I'm somebody who loved anime, if I heard from a friend that they watched an anime, my first question would be like, what anime was it? Did you enjoy it? Not, was it dubbed or is it subbed? Like, I don't know. That to me, that literally doesn't matter. That's like saying, hey Dom, you played Dishonored 2, subtitles or no subtitles?
Well, and it just goes to show you that, yeah.
Why does that
Fucking
matter?
subtitles. If you don't use the subtitles, you're a fucking noob, man.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out.
It goes to show you that a lot of this stuff that we're kind of hovering around, the big point to make here is that it's just so much bickering over shit that doesn't matter, because
especially stuff that doesn't matter to the individual. They just complain about things that they might not even have to ever deal with, and they just complain and complain. It's so frustrating.
I watch a lot of film analysis, of course, game analysis. That's what we're doing here at the moment on YouTube. I watch a lot of anime analysis on YouTube, and half of these motherfuckers that are complaining about these idiots watching dubs, right? You watch their YouTube videos, and the archival footage that they're showing of the anime they're talking about is off of one of these shitty websites where you can just, you can stream free anime all over the internet, right? So many of these random websites, and they're just watching it in 480p. It may say 720 or 1080 on the website, but it's pixelated. It's got a watermark in the side. They're not watching Blu-ray quality anime,
Potato
but
HD.
the sub. This is the original Japanese translation, which I don't even fucking speak Japanese. I wouldn't know if it's a proper translation, even if I wanted to. I wouldn't. It's not even my native fucking language, right? So they're concerned about quality in areas where it doesn't matter nearly as much. To me, what matters is the picture quality proper? Is the definition of the picture good? Is the audio quality there? That's the stuff that really matters at the end of the day to me. And same thing with video games, where it's like there's so many conversations that get had about, shit that's just fucking dumb. And I'm like, we could be having conversations, we could be pushing developers in directions that games need to go, as opposed to making them spiral downward because we're so concerned about just bullshit.
Well, this is the the two-headed coin, right? Of like, we want games to be popular because the more games are popular, the more money gets put into them, the more people buy them, the better experiences we have. The more popular games become, the wider the audience becomes, right? And then there becomes this large disparity between the people who, like us, and then the normal general audience. And in that normal general audience, there's all of the people that come with that high amount of people in one singular community of bickering and arguing over things that are trivial, things that don't matter, things that nobody's worrying about except for this group of people. And somebody who's saying some dumbass shit, you know what they want to hear? Somebody else saying some dumbass shit, and they group together, and together they make a louder voice of saying some really dumb stuff. And I understand Colin's wording and stuff like that, and Colin's very cynical, pessimistic, Eeyore, you know what I mean? And I do agree where he's coming from, where it sucks that we should be talking about the specific things that we want to talk about, and there's better and more important things to talk about. But I do think he has some responsibility on himself, just like the rest of the Kind of Funny guys he worked with, to cultivate that conversation and say, we want a community where we talk about the more important things. I think leaving that and then bringing that up, I never once really... I heard about him complaining, and Kind of Funny, obviously he always did, but he never really made this important, you know what I mean? There was never a video where
I don't know. I think he definitely tried, and I do think that was part of the thing that he's bringing up. I think it's worth it. It's really just 3-minute part of a only 17-minute podcast, so I think it'd be worth listening to. Yeah. Especially since you are part of the Kind of Funny community, and it might give you some needed closure in a sense, Jared. Both you as well, Dom. But he was bringing up good points that he did try. He did want to change the conversation and make it more about the shit that actually matters, but it's just such an overwhelming majority of the community. Another thing that he brought up, which would be a good little conversation for us to have before we finish up here, is the fact that a lot of the gaming industry is not about games anymore. It's about the YouTubers that are talking about games. It's about the people streaming the games. It's about the personalities at your favorite gaming outlet, IGN, GameSpot, Polygon, Kotaku, things like that. And you're so involved in that it's not even about the game that they're playing or talking about, discussing. It's about the personalities connected to that. And a great point that he made that kills me all the fucking time, it's gotten so far under my skin, is the fact that you have all these outlets like, let's just take specifically gaming outlets, not even YouTubers or streamers, but you have people like at IGN, GameSpot, Kotaku, Polygon, the places I just mentioned, that are being paid to essentially not be experts necessarily, but to be specialists, right, in the gaming industry. And there's so many times where they just don't know what the fuck they're talking about, and they don't, as opposed to, you know, getting more into the nitty gritty of how games work and what really goes into the process of making games. They'd rather just be a personality on YouTube or have a goofy YouTube show where they're doing something in a game that's not even about that game. It's really just like, let's fuck with the character creator, or let's see if we can, you know, blow this thing up as, you know, like the biggest explosion that we can make in this certain racing game or something like that. It's like, I just wish that these personalities that people are so intrinsically tied to and follow so vehemently, I wish a lot of them knew what the fuck they were talking about, especially when they're talking about games. They may mention something about a game that's just completely incorrect, but they say it as if they know what the hell they're saying, and it's just so frustrating that they're supposed to be specialists in this field. And I feel like just on our podcast here at Controlled Interest, I feel like we do a lot better job a lot of times of just knowing what the fuck we're talking about when it comes to games. That's very upsetting to me, you know, that people are getting paid to not know what the fuck they're saying.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation, and I think they're two different conversations, because like the people on YouTube, like, and stuff like that, I mean, they're entertainers for all intents and purposes. You know what I mean? Like, they happen to be playing video games, but they are entertainers, and I agree with you to a certain extent of like, they should know what they're talking about. I think a lot of that, though, has to do with the industry and how it works. Like my personal take on it is, like,
recently.
I think the pay for what you're asking them for them to do, I think, is above their pay grade. But I'm not saying that's not necessarily their fault to not know what they're talking about. I do think we have this weird systemic problem of these, like, crazy turnover rates as far as reviews and stuff like that, and I don't think these people are getting compensated the way they should for the work they're doing. Then in turn, it's like, well, if you have one person putting their hand in 8 different jars and you're not compensating to the point that they should be compensated, then it's up to them to be like, well, I'll try to cover this as best as I can. I'm not taking away all the responsibility from them. That's the one thing I want to get across. Like, I'm not
I
trying
agree
to...
with the...
Yeah.
I agree with the compensation part, especially since I think all 4 of those, or at least 3 of the outlets that I just mentioned, are based in San Francisco, the most expensive city to live in the United States, and they aren't getting compensated correctly.
Yeah.
But maybe I didn't necessarily make this specific point clear enough. I'm not necessarily wanting them to know the very nitty-gritty of how a game is coded necessarily. I am wanting them to know when they say, oh yeah, that game was exclusive to Xbox 360. It's like, no, there's definitely a PS3 version of that game, and I know that. Why don't you know that? Because you're fucking paid to talk about games.
You're an expert. It's kind of like walking into, like, I worked at a Best Buy. I don't know if either of you did, but like...
Oh, I did
GameStop.
too.
Best Buy does this thing where, like, they don't care if you know what you're selling. They just want you to be in an area and sell it. Which bothers me, being on the opposite end of that for the first time when I got hired at Best Buy, of like, you know, my parents or people who come into these stores, they expect the person they're talking to know what the hell they're talking about. And for me, I'm like, I don't care if you're getting paid $10 an hour or $15 an hour. If you're working at a Best Buy and you're working in the computer section, you should know about computers, and that means knowing about them, not lying to a consumer to get a sell. You know what I mean? And I agree with you there of like, yeah, we can have the whole conversation of them not being compensated properly, but you're getting paid to talk about video games and be an influencer. You should know your statistics. Even, and it's not being like, be a human library. Like, they have the outlines for the podcast they talk about. You can either A, be like, I'm not sure about that, or B, refresh yourself before a podcast. Because if you have something that's being run well, you'll get that information out there and be like, oh, I need to do research on this before I go. Like, for instance, with our podcast, we don't get that many viewers, we don't get that many listeners. Say, for instance, we lived in a world where we were progressing really great as far as listeners and stuff when we were growing exponentially.
Exponential growth.
I would make it a priority to get you guys the docket a couple of days beforehand, because you guys can read up on the news stories yourself. You guys would probably want that too, so we're more informed. We would make it more of a priority to make sure we're giving you the absolute best information. We're not getting paid to do this podcast. You know what I mean?
Even at that, you know, and it's just really a hobby for us at the end of the day. I think we're still more well informed in a lot of these situations, which is really kind of fucking pathetic for those other people, you know, that are getting paid and should know, you know,
I think
at least as much as I do.
I think you get a lot of, so my philosophy is usually like, it's easy to never be wrong, right?
Yeah.
If you just are aware of what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
If you don't know, like,
a smart man knows he knows nothing.
Exactly. Like,
yeah.
use a lot of I thinks and shoulds. Now, you don't want to do that in like a job interview. You want to have confidence, but if you don't really know something, don't
speak
fake
definitively.
It.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and also, I think a huge problem with this is that a lot of these people are spread too thin. Of like, basically, they're based in San Francisco.
Back to the compensation.
Yeah, they're based in San Francisco, so they pay all their employees, and instead of having a dedicated Xbox team, PlayStation team, Nintendo team, because of financial reasons, you have to make jacks of all trades, and with doing that, you spread people more thin, right? Because instead of being an Ryan from IGN is like, he's an Xbox guy. He's worked on Xbox his entire career. He's at IGN because he's an Xbox guy. He does other stuff. Obviously, he's
Ryan McCaffrey.
Yeah, exactly, Ryan McCaffrey. He's worth more to them outside of just Xbox, but he is the Xbox guy, and I think that does say a lot because Ryan is rarely wrong, and when he is, he's like, "Oh,
yeah,
I'm wrong."
I'm not a huge Xbox guy, but I love listening to him talk because he knows what the fuck he's talking about.
Yeah, and like my problem, I think, is with the industry of like, hey, maybe even LA would be cheaper as opposed to San Francisco, or like, because you still want to be
in the middle of the fucking country, man. And then they go to the cons, which are spread out all over the place. Anyways, you're not everything is in San Francisco. The development companies are all over the fucking place.
Yeah.
Why do we have to be in the most expensive city where we are spreading people too thin, like you say, Jared?
I understand from like a production standpoint and stuff like that. You want to be in a more entertainment hub. But like I said, I think there's other like Seattle and even Los Angeles, like as expensive as it is in comparison to San Francisco, not even close. Right. And I think that's the huge problem of like, we're entering this phase where they don't have the money to pay the experts, so what they have to do is they have to find people who are good personalities that can be very like diverse, right? And being
exactly, and that goes back to what you were saying with Ryan McCaffrey. It's like, I love the fact that he knows so much about Xbox. He's not going to get on Podcast Beyond that he guests on every now and then and go, guys, I'm the fucking expert on PlayStation 2. Like, he knows that he's not that dude. He knows where his limits lie. And so when I hear people on podcasts just this whole thing about, well, it's part of our job to play a little bit of everything, so we try to play every game it's fucking ridiculous. There's so many fucking games out nowadays. And even 10 years ago there was so many. Even, you know, in the fucking 80s there was enough games to where you're not going to play everything.
Yeah.
So it's stupid to say or try to play everything as opposed to be awesome at what you're awesome at. Be an awesome Xbox commentator like Ryan McCaffrey. No PlayStation like Colin and Greg did back in the day, and still do to an extent. Be awesome at what you're awesome at, and quit trying to stretch yourself so thin, like you're saying, Jared.
Yeah, I think it's a huge, like, they have pressure from their ups. You know what I mean, to do this stuff. It's not like it's like
it's on the up the suits.
Yeah, I think it's a very complicated issue that I think eventually we're going to see a breaking point of something's going to happen.
Absolutely.
I think either there's going to be some type of like strike related thing, not necessarily a strike itself happening, but something where like journalists, which is still weird that we call them journalists, we should be at a point where I understand they call them enthusiasts and stuff like that, but there's people who are enthusiastic about movies who are considered movie critics. It's still a weird point where we don't respect games to the point where we have game critics. That bothers me.
We need a new word, or to just start calling them critics. And it's another part where it's like some of this stuff is just so young that it just hasn't had the proper time to develop. But another great point that Colin made is just that games aren't going to be taken seriously until the people surrounding them, like us in gamer culture, are taking them seriously, and part of that is taking gaming critique seriously, and that's part of what this conversation is. It's like knowing what the fuck you're talking about.
And the opposite end of that kind of sucks is like, we don't know if Colin's ever going to come back to the gaming industry, but him leaving, I mean, that kind of is like, well, one of the people that was kind of vying for that left. I'm not saying it's his fault or anything. I'm not
and he said this on the podcast. He felt like he lost that battle. He couldn't keep fighting it.
And maybe it's not for him then, and maybe I don't know. It's a very tough conversation. I don't want to make this whole conversation about Colin, but I do think he brought up some interesting points, and it is a conversation worth having. I think the industry is young and it's very complicated, and there are problems with it, but there are problems in every culture, and it's up to people like us and the people we know to keep talking about interesting things and talk about the things that matter. And I do think there's room for people who are only optimistic. I think there's room for people who talk about all of the conversations. I think there's room for people who are only critics, and people who kind of look at the bad in games. And I think that's an interesting thing too, of like people always talk about like, I want my channel to be, or my influence to be positive, or I want my influence to be a little bit everything. I do think there's also room for people who are like, no, I want to see the flaws that are happening and point those out too. I think there's a conversation for that as well.
We need that more than we get.
I think it's a balancing act. That's it for me. Do you guys have any closing words before we?
No, Dom, I'd like to say, a solution to this, quick shout out. Obviously, we love the Easy Allies. We've had a couple of them on the show, and those guys are great. Quick shout out to the fact that on the Easy Allies podcast, every week they start with corrections. I know that that's not something that every podcast does or is going to do.
I do like
that. But at least the fact that, we are specialists in the gaming industry, but we also fuck up. We also say shit that we don't know about. And sometimes they're talking about, fucking Sypha Diaz and Star Wars. It really has nothing to do with games that they're being corrected on, but still they're willing to accept the, not necessarily criticism, but the advice that people are giving them, like, hey, you messed this up, maybe go back and check yourself on that. And there's just so much of the gaming critique industry, let's call it, that isn't not only not willing to do that, but is just oblivious to that fact and blows right by it. So shout out to them for taking that time.
I think the thing too, that they have scheduled guests like every week. Brandon and Kyle are always there, but the other two rotate. I think that's very helpful too, and I think that can be something that other outlets can look at, because if Shadow of War is coming out this week, that means that you want at least, say you're hosting a 3-man podcast like we are, and you don't play it, you want at least one of your two guests to do it. That means that if you tell them far enough in advance you're going to be on this date, one of those two people can coordinate and make sure they play the game, instead of having these 4 people are available today. Did any of you play Shadow of War? And I know it's probably going to happen because it's the whole dipping your hand in a bunch of different games, but I do think maybe scheduling, and I do think there's a lot of figuring out to be had, because we are in this weird nebulous space where it's a little amorphous in its like design.
It's like you said, people are just stretched too thin, and that does suck. That very much needs to change, and the breaking point that you mentioned earlier, I think, might be a lot closer than we realize.
Well, especially as games get bigger and bigger. Like, you can't expect somebody to finish Super Mario Odyssey and Assassin's Creed Origins, the same person, to like have in-depth thoughts about both of those games in a week span.
And Wolfenstein, and also have been catching up on the Raid and Destiny or what the fuck ever.
Exactly. I think that does it for episode 75 of the Controlled Interest Gamecast. We're going to be talking about what we're going to be playing. I'm going to be trying to finish up Cuphead. Like I said, I only have 3 stages left. So I want to talk about it real quick. Not going to go on a huge tangent. The interesting thing for me for the Cuphead difficulty curve is, I would say, and this is relative to Cuphead's difficulty, I think Inkwell Island 1 is easy. I think halfway through Inkwell Isle 2 it goes up to medium, and then up to maybe like semi-hard, and then Inkwell Isle 3 I think goes up to hard. But I do think like the last couple of levels in Inkwell Island, obviously it's about how you approach it, so my last couple of levels are different than yours depending on your pathing, but I do think it eases you back in. I think there's a definite spike, but then I do think it eases out. I'm loving that game though so
relative
much.
To Cuphead's difficulty.
Relative to Cuphead's difficulty.
The first one's easy.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to be playing Destiny 2. We have a group together that's going to try to do the raid on Saturday, so hopefully we're able to do that.
Fire team.
What else? I'm trying to think of what else. Going to be playing more Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I am enjoying it a lot. I had some negative things to say about it, but I am enjoying it a lot more than I thought I was going to, and that says something. Like I said, I'm not a Zelda guy. I'm not Dom by any means, but I do enjoy Legend of Zelda, and I am having a good time with it.
We were both a little bit negative on that game, and I think that it's pleasantly surprised with this. Yeah, we have complaints, but I was pleasantly surprised. I think you're pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I do think there's an interesting like I said, I'm not finished with it, so I can't have final thoughts. But it is so interesting to me playing this game and still hearing people talk about how it's like arguably one of the greatest games of all time, and it's like all this. I'm like, so far I just don't see it. Not even close.
There's way better Zelda games.
Yeah.
For that point.
I had my complaints too, even, and I'm sitting here like at first before having played it, like, oh my god, I can't wait. Look at these reviews. This game's gonna be amazing. And I still loved it to death.
Yeah.
But I'm in the same boat. Like, I don't know, Ocarina of Time is way better than this. I would even probably admit it. There's a handful of other games that are definitely better than this.
Yeah.
It's still great.
I think it's a great game. It's just that whole conversation is a little hyperbolic. I'm going to try to see Blade Runner 2049 this week. I was going to see it last week. Some things came up. Definitely watching the final cut beforehand. I'm actually doing another really quick tangent. I'm actually doing the trial for YouTube TV to watch because I wanted to watch Mitchell Trubisky's debut for the Chicago Bears. Anyways, that's available through YouTube TV, the final cut, so I don't even have to rent it. So I'll be able to watch that too.
Dope.
Yeah, it's pretty much it for me. We've gone a little long, so I didn't want to keep you guys too long. What about you guys?
So I got more Dishonored, Death of the Outsider, if I get to it, which I might not. And then Cuphead. I'll definitely get to that. I won't be seeing Blade Runner because I want to contribute to its flop and watch the world burn around Jordan. I'm just kidding.
How far
God fucking damn it, Dom. And you don't like Dragon Ball Z? Go fuck yourself.
Oh my god, no! I don't know. Maybe I'd have to start from the beginning, and maybe I'll do it someday.
Dom, how far are you in Cuphead, real quick?
I haven't played it since we last talked, so I'm on the second island.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What about you, Jordan? What are you going to be watching, reading, playing?
So real quick on Cuphead, I've been thinking, and I think I'm going to go with just restarting the game. I've only beaten, a couple, 2-3 bosses, so because of the fact that I did have such a blunder when it came to my special moves and stuff like that, the way I spent the coins, I think it's going to help me a lot, just help my general enjoyment of the game if I just go ahead and restart. And I don't think, the shit's still going to be hard, like Jared said, relative to Cuphead's difficulty, that first part's not that bad. So I think I'll be able to get through those bosses. Now that I have the timing down, I know the way that they're going to act. I think I'll be able to move through that quicker. And
if it's anything like Dark Souls, your second time through, way easier. Just had the experience.
Just different.
I do think, too, it's a game that you get better at. And as you continue to play the game, you just naturally get better at it. And and you're not somebody with like 2 left thumbs or something. Like you're quote unquote good at video games. So
I beat the fuck out of Bloodborne, bro.
I think you'll see that natural progression in your skill level at it too, because playing through that initial part of Cuphead, you're like, man, this is kind of difficult. The bosses I'm beating now in like Island 3, I'm like, if I was at the same place I was at the beginning of the game, I would have no chance in hell, so.
There's a progression in you and not just the game, which I will commend them for. Not a lot of games are good at that.
And I do think they do a really good job of like mix and match your weapons and your abilities to the bosses, and you'll find some really interesting things that work for you specifically. So.
Okay, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
That's a good tip. So besides that, let's see here. I'm definitely going to be, like I said, I think I'll really kind of dive into Shadow of War this week. I'll probably be doing a lot more side stuff and kind of just upgrading my character, enjoying that world. Jared, you and I love that Lord of the Rings universe, and thus far, I've had a blast with the bits of lore. Shelob is the main villainess of the game. She's the giant spider from the Silmarillion. And that's just so fucking awesome. There's a lot of Silmarillion stuff in this game, which I love. Fucking love the Silmarillion. Been thinking about going back to it for a second trip because of all that stuff in this game. So definitely enjoying that game. Definitely going to be going farther. I thought I might finish Destiny's campaign before this game came out, but I didn't. So I'll probably just go ahead and finish that up, and then maybe get to the in-game stuff whenever, just here and there. Like I also said, I'm probably going to be restarting Cuphead. Played a little bit of Ruiner, the cyberpunk game published by Devolver Digital. I didn't play very much, so I don't have much to say on it, but I definitely think I'll be heading back to it. As far as what I'm watching, I don't have too much to say because I'm not finished with it. I'll be starting season 3, the latest of Twin Peaks, because I finished the original 2. Got a lot to say about that series. I'll wait until I'm totally done. I'm currently watching the movie that's best watched after the first 2 seasons, even though it kind of takes place before it. That part is not very good at all, even I would say bad. So I'll give more detail on that, like I said, when I'm finished. But Fire Walk With Me, the movie, is pretty fucking bad. So that, and then also you guys have been mentioning American Vandal on Netflix. I watched the first 2 episodes. I'm not super into it. I think the sense of humor is just not really my thing. I think it's it's just not really making me laugh. I get it. I get how it could be funny. I get the premise is funny.
The premise.
What's that?
The premise.
Yeah, the premises. I totally see where people are coming from. I think it is a little bit overrated, but at the same time, like I said, it may just not be for me. With that being said, it is only 8 episodes. They're only 30 minutes apiece, so I do think I'll end up finishing it just because I'm into it at this point, and it is such a big deal for people that I might as well be in on that conversation. So probably finish that up. Maybe my thoughts on it will change.
I mean, comedy's so subjective. That's the toughest thing, is like somebody can absolutely love something and somebody can not, and that's just like comedy, man. Like, ugh.
That's comedy, man. No, I totally agree.
Comedy,
I totally
man.
agree.
Yeah.
I think, and this is not in the coming week, but I will say this, guys, especially playing Shadow of War. You guys know I fucking love this series, and I'm feeling the burn for Assassin's Creed Origins. It's coming up, baby. Just a couple more weeks. I'm very excited about Mario Odyssey. I'm going to be getting them both day one, but holy fucking shit, dude. It's time. We had the whole year gap, and we're coming back. I'm about to fucking assassinate some fools, you know what I'm saying? Hidden Blade style.
Yeah, you gotta just endure like a couple of issued games and then a not great movie.
Yeah, I love Syndicate, and I actually like Unity a lot better than most people, but it has been tough taking the year off. The movie, just fucking make a movie where it's mostly about assassins, and it would be great, because the assassins part in that movie were fucking dope. It's just like, why did you spend so much time in Abstergo, man?
Also, shout out to Sony. They're apparently working on a Settlers of Catan movie for some reason.
No comment.
Yeah.
No comment.
That was episode 75 of the Controlled Interest Gamecast. If you can, please follow us at Twitter. We're at CTRLINT on there. I'm at Jared _ Dom is at Dom's Oreos, and Jordan is at Mellow Modus. Also, please subscribe to us on YouTube. That definitely helps. Just search Controlled Interest and we'll pop right up. And if you're listening on iTunes, please leave us a review. And if you're not listening on iTunes and you're listening on YouTube, please head over to iTunes and follow us, please. That definitely helps. We'll be back in episode 76. I'm going to hopefully try to get a guest in the next couple of weeks, because we haven't had one for a while, but it's so hard with when we record and stuff like that. So not a promise, but I'm going to try talking to some people and figuring some stuff out.
Even still, I want to say, just real quick, great podcast today, guys. The trio, we fucking nailed it. I thought we had awesome conversations throughout, and I think we always have a solid podcast, but this week I thought was spectacular.
Yeah, I think
maybe even spooktacular, since it's October.
Spooktacular. Ooh, that gives me an idea of what we should do the week of Halloween. The spooktacular. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you guys next week.